The fence creaked softly when the wind moved through it, a low wooden complaint that matched the mood of the evening. The sun was slipping down behind the hills, turning the sky the color of old copper and bruised peaches. She stood on the inside of the fence, fingers wrapped tight around a splintered post, like it was the only thing keeping her upright. Dust clung to her shoes and the hem of her worn dress. She hadn't planned on talking to him. She hadn't even planned on stopping. But he was there again, leaning easy against the rail, hat tipped low, boots crossed like the land itself had taught him patience. "I'm not pretty," she whispered. The words surprised her as much as they might have surprised him. They slipped out before she could swallow them back down, before she could coat them in humor or apology. Her voice was thin, almost lost in the open space between them, but it carried something heavier than sound. Years of mirrors avoided. Years of comparisons she never won. Years of being the quiet girl people didn't look at twice. For a moment, he didn't answer. He didn't rush to fill the space the way most people did when discomfort showed up. He just shifted his weight, the leather of his belt creaking faintly, eyes lifting from the dirt to her face. Really looking. Not scanning. Not measuring. Just seeing. "That's fine," he said at last. His voice was low and steady, like a creek that knew its path. "I need honest, not fancy." The wind tugged at the loose strands of her hair. She felt heat rise to her cheeks, not the sharp sting of embarrassment she was used to, but something warmer, something unfamiliar. She had expected pity. Or worse, reassurance she didn't believe. She had expected him to argue with her, to tell her she was wrong, to dress the truth up in something prettier than it felt. Instead, he had accepted her words and stepped around them like they weren't a flaw at all. She swallowed. "Most people want fancy. Most people get tired," he replied. "Fancy takes work." She studied his face then, the lines etched deep by sun and weather, the scar near his jaw that looked like it came with a story he'd never volunteer. This wasn't a man who wasted words. Everything about him felt deliberate, like he only carried what he needed. There was something freeing about that. "I didn't mean to say that out loud," she admitted. He gave a small shrug. Sometimes the truth gets impatient. A quiet settled between them, not awkward, not pressing. Just space. The kind she rarely found with other people, who always seemed to expect something from her she couldn't quite deliver. She loosened her grip on the fence, fingers aching from holding on too tight for too long. "You always pass through here?" she asked. "Been working the ranch down the road," he said, nodding toward the rolling stretch of land beyond the trees. "Not much reason to leave." She nodded like she understood that kind of rootedness, even though she'd spent most of her life wanting to disappear. The sky darkened inch by inch, and somewhere a cow lowed, a sound so ordinary it felt grounding. "Well," she said finally, taking a small step back, "I should get going." He tipped his hat, a simple gesture, respectful. "Good night." She walked away before she could say something else she didn't mean to share. But as she followed the dirt path home, his words echoed in her chest. Honest, not fancy. It felt like permission she didn't know she'd been waiting for. Sleep didn't come easy that night. She lay staring at the ceiling, listening to the house settle and creak, replaying the moment again and again. She wondered if he remembered it the same way, or if it had been nothing more than another quiet exchange in a long day. For her, it felt like a small crack had opened. Somewhere inside, letting in air. The next morning, she woke before the alarm, the sky still pale and undecided. She pulled on her uniform, the diner apron already bearing stains that never quite washed out, and tied her hair back without much care. The mirror above the sink caught her reflection, and for once she didn't flinch. She didn't smile either. She just looked. Honest, she thought. That was enough for today. The diner sat off Route 9, a squat little building with a flickering sign and a parking lot full of dust and tire marks. It smelled like coffee, grease, and the faint sweetness of pie that never quite left the air. By the time she clocked in, the early crowd had already started to trickle through, truckers, ranch hands, locals who liked their routines untouched. She moved between tables with practiced ease, pouring coffee, taking orders, offering polite nods. Most people barely noticed her beyond what she provided. She'd learned to exist in that space, useful but unseen. The bell over the door jingled, and she felt it before she saw him. That same steady presence, like the room had adjusted to make space. He took his usual seat in the back booth, the one with a view of the window and the door. Hat off this time, resting beside him. Dust still clung to his boots. She approached with the coffee pot, heart doing something inconvenient in her chest. Black? She asked. He looked up, recognition flickering briefly across his face. Please. She poured, careful not to spill. Anything else? Not yet. She nodded and moved away, but she could feel his gaze following her, not in a way that made her shrink, but like he was noticing the rhythm of her movement, the way she carried herself. It made her acutely aware of her hands, the faint scar on her knuckle, the way her shoulders tended to curl inward. An hour passed. Then another. He stayed, nursing his coffee, watching the diner wake up fully. When the rush slowed, she found herself refilling his cup again. You always watching, she said before she could stop herself. It came out more curious than accusing. He smiled slightly. Yeah, why? World moves fast, he said. I like noticing things that don't. Her pulse skipped. She leaned back against the booth across from him, surprising herself. You don't talk much. Neither do you. She huffed a quiet laugh. Guess we're both guilty. Silence stretched again, comfortable this time. She wiped down the counter nearby, pretending not to be aware of how easily he shared space without crowding her. Most folks come in here loud, she said eventually. Like they're afraid if they stop talking, something bad will catch up. And you? He asked. She shrugged. I learned early that quiet keeps you safer. He studied her for a moment, something thoughtful passing through his eyes. Quiet can hide things, he said gently. Doesn't mean they're not there. Her throat tightened. She busied herself with a stack of plates, grateful when another table waved her over. When she came back, he was standing, sliding a few bills onto the table. You heading out already? She asked. Work waits for no one, he said. Then, after a beat, I'll be back. It wasn't a promise, just a statement, but it settled in her chest like one. True to his word, he came back the next evening. And the next. Sometimes they spoke. Sometimes they didn't. Sometimes he asked about her day, and sometimes he just listened while she talked, surprised by how easily the words came when she wasn't being rushed or judged. She learned little things about him in pieces. That he'd grown up on land like this. That he preferred early mornings and strong coffee. That he fixed what he could and lived with what he couldn't. He didn't ask many questions about her past, and she was grateful for that, but when she offered bits of it on her own, he held them carefully, like fragile things that mattered. One evening, as she wiped down his table after closing, she realized something had shifted. The diner felt warmer. The mirrors less cruel. The space she took up didn't feel like a mistake. The sky had been threatening all afternoon, clouds stacking heavy and dark over the hills like they were holding a grudge. By the time she locked the diner door and stepped outside, the air felt thick, charged, every breath tasting like rain. She pulled her jacket tighter around herself and started down the gravel road toward home, head lowered, hoping she'd beat the storm. She didn't. The first crack of thunder split the sky so loud it made her flinch, followed by rain that came down hard and fast, soaking her hair and clothes in seconds. She gasped and laughed at the same time, a helpless sound, and broke into a run. The dirt road turned slick beneath her shoes, mud splashing up her calves. Headlights cut through the gray curtain of rain, slowing beside her. The truck window rolled down. Get in, he said, voice firm but calm, like he'd already decided. She didn't argue. She climbed in, breathless and dripping, the cab filling instantly with the smell of rain, leather, and dust. Thunder rolled again as he pulled back onto the road, windshield wipers working overtime. Thought you might get caught, he said. She pushed wet hair off her face. Looks like you were right. They drove in silence for a few minutes, rain drumming on the roof so loud it felt like the world had narrowed down to just that sound. When he turned off the main road toward the ranch, she hesitated. You don't have to, she started. Storm's only getting worse, he replied. You can wait it out. The ranch appeared through the rain like something out of another time. Wide, low buildings, fences stretching into the gloom, a barn standing solid and dark. He parked near it, engine cutting off, leaving only the roar of rain and thunder. They hurried inside the barn, boots thudding against packed earth. The smell hit her first. Hay, animals, damp wood. He shut the door behind them, the storm muted but still present, rain rattling against the metal roof. For a moment, they just stood there, both soaked, water dripping from her jacket onto the ground. "You okay?" he asked. She nodded, though her hands were trembling. "I don't like storms much." "Me neither," he said quietly. "They remind you how small you are." Another boom of thunder made her shoulders tense. Without thinking, she hugged her arms around herself, nails digging into fabric. He noticed. Of course he did. "There's a bench," he said gently, nodding toward the side. "You can sit." She did, perching on the edge, staring at the floor like it held answers she wasn't ready to face. The barn felt too quiet between claps of thunder, every sound magnified. Her breath came shallow. "I'm sorry," she said suddenly. "I don't mean to be like this." "Like what?" he asked, settling against a nearby post, giving her space. "Weak," she said. "Broken." He shook his head. "Storms scare everyone. Some folks just hide it better." She laughed softly, humorless. "That's kind of my problem. I hide everything." Silence stretched. Rainwater dripped steadily from the roof. Somewhere, an animal shifted in its stall. "I wasn't always quiet," she said before she could stop herself. The words came out rough, like they'd been waiting a long time. "I used to talk a lot. Laugh louder. Thought that if I was kind enough, useful enough, people would stay." He didn't interrupt. "They didn't," she continued, fingers twisting in her lap. "They told me I was too much. Then not enough. Told me I wasn't pretty, wasn't worth choosing. After a while, you start believing it. You stop looking at mirrors. You stop asking for things." Thunder cracked again, closer this time. Her voice wavered. "I learned how to disappear," she whispered. It felt safer than hoping. He crossed the space between them slowly, careful not to startle her, and sat on the bench a short distance away. Not touching. Just there. "You don't gotta be brave here," he said. "You don't gotta be anything." Her composure shattered at that. Tears spilled over, hot and uncontrollable, sobs racking her body as years of swallowed pain surged up all at once. She covered her face, ashamed, but didn't move away. He stayed. Didn't try to fix it. Didn't rush her. He rested his forearms on his knees, grounding, solid. When she leaned forward without realizing it, her shoulder brushing his arm, he didn't pull back. "I'm tired," she cried. "I'm so tired of feeling like I don't matter." He turned to her then, eyes steady. "You matter," he said simply. "You always did. Folks just failed to see it." She looked at him through tears. "How can you be so sure?" "Because I see you," he replied. "And you're real." Something about that broke open a door inside her she hadn't known was locked. She cried until her chest ached and her throat burned, until the storm outside began to soften, thunder drifting farther away. When the rain finally slowed, she felt empty in a strange, peaceful way. Like a field after a wildfire. Raw, but ready. "Thank you," she said quietly. He nodded. "Anytime." He drove her home once the road was safer, neither of them speaking much. Words felt unnecessary now, like something sacred had already been shared. The next morning dawned clean and bright, the world washed new. Sunlight glinted off puddles, the air smelling like wet earth and grass. She stepped outside and felt something unfamiliar in her chest, lightness. She found him at the ranch later that day, sitting on the fence, watching the horses move slow and calm in the pasture. She approached hesitantly. "You came," he said, smiling. "I wanted to," she replied. The honesty felt good. They stood side by side, silence easy between them. "You ever regret staying?" she asked. "Living out here?" He thought for a moment. "Sometimes. But then I remember why I chose it. Peace matters." She nodded. "I think I'm starting to understand that." She hesitated, then turned to him fully. "Do you really think I'm enough?" He didn't answer right away. He looked at her the way he always did, carefully, fully. "Enough isn't the right word," he said. "You're honest. You're kind. You're strong in ways that don't make noise. That's not just enough. That's rare." Her eyes stung again, but this time she smiled through it. "You don't scare easily, do you?" He chuckled. "Only by things that matter." She took a breath, steadying herself. I'm scared, she admitted. Of wanting this. Of hoping. He reached out then, not grabbing, just offering his hand, palm up. We can take it slow. No pretending. No fancy. She placed her hand in his, heart pounding. His grip was warm, sure. Honest, she said. Always, he replied. That felt different in ways she couldn't quite name at first. Nothing dramatic happened. The world didn't suddenly become softer or easier. The diner still smelled like burnt coffee by mid-morning, the ranch still demanded long hours, and the road between their lives was still the same stretch of dust and gravel. But something inside her had shifted, like a knot loosened just enough to let blood flow again. She noticed it one morning when a customer snapped his fingers to get her attention and she didn't flinch. She finished wiping the counter, met his eyes, and said calmly, "I'll be right with you." Her voice didn't shake. The power in that surprised her. Later, when she caught her reflection in the chrome of the coffee machine, she didn't look away. She didn't search for flaws. She just saw a woman standing straighter than she used to. He came into the diner that evening, later than usual. His shoulders looked heavier, jaw tight like he'd been grinding his teeth. All day. She poured his coffee without asking, set it down gently, and hesitated. Long day? She asked. He nodded. Fence went down near the east pasture. Spooked the horses. You fix it. Mostly. He took a sip, exhaled slowly. Some things don't stay fixed. She understood that more than she wanted to admit. She slid into the booth across from him, not caring if anyone noticed. The diner was nearly empty anyway, the hum of the fridge loud in the quiet. You don't have to carry everything alone, she said. The words felt strange coming from her mouth, like advice she'd never allowed herself to believe applied to anyone else. He studied her, a soft smile tugging at his mouth. You learning fast. Maybe I'm just tired of watching people I care about pretend they're fine. Something warm settled in his eyes at that. He didn't reach for her hand, didn't close the space between them. He just let the moment be what it was. She was starting to understand that about him, that he respected the slow build, the quiet truth. A few nights later, he asked her to come by the ranch for dinner. The invitation was simple, almost casual, but her heart kicked hard against her ribs when he said it. She agreed before fear could talk her out of it. She stood in front of her closet longer than she meant to, fingers brushing over clothes that felt too plain, too worn. The old voice crept in, telling her she wasn't enough for this, that she'd embarrass herself. She almost listened. Then she remembered his words. Honest, not fancy. She chose a simple dress, clean and soft, hair loose around her shoulders. When she looked in the mirror, she still didn't think she was pretty. But she didn't think she was wrong for showing up either. That felt like progress. The ranch at dusk glowed gold, sunlight catching on the tall grass and weathered wood. He was waiting on the porch when she arrived, sleeves rolled up, hands dusty. His smile when he saw her was unguarded, real, and it made her chest ache in the best way. You came, he said. I said I would. I know, he replied. Still glad. Dinner was simple. Beans, cornbread, meat cooked slow and tender. They sat at the small wooden table, knees brushing occasionally, each contact sending a quiet jolt through her. Conversation flowed easier than she expected. They talked about nothing and everything. Childhood memories. Favorite quiet moments. Regrets neither of them fully named but both understood. Afterward, they stepped outside. The sky stretched wide and dark, stars sharp and endless. She hugged her arms around herself, the night air cool against her skin.